All right, so with our Lego fully designed, we can now get into creating our rig system for this character. Yeah, so we're just gonna go with a really simple rig. I'm gonna start this off by jumping into the front view. I'm also gonna kind of take care of our colors. Yeah, so I'm gonna drop this off at click on 5, just so we can just see the base model. I'm also gonna go into the shading menu, and I'm going to choose the option called X-ray joints. Yeah, so X-ray joints. And the reason why I'm doing that is just so that we can actually see the joints while we're kind of placing them. Now our two primary views are going to be our front view and our side view. So I'm also going to jump into my side view and do the same thing. Yeah, so I'm going to go into my shading menu. I'll make sure that one also has X-ray joints on, and then I'm going to press the 5 key to make sure we're just looking at we're not gonna have the textures kind of get in the way a bit. All right, and then we're gonna start putting some joints in here. One last thing, those of you who've been following along with the texturing, you may also want to check your outliner, make sure that everything is labeled. I know I did not do the right hand. I did not rename that, so you may want to go ahead and do that. All right, but here's how we can create our joints. So we're gonna switch our menu set. Yeah, so we've been in modeling for quite a bit. We're gonna switch over to rigging. Yeah, so we're gonna switch over to rigging, and we're gonna start laying down the bone structure. For those of you who are new to this, bones are basically in the skeleton menu. Yeah, so we're gonna click on skeleton over here, and anytime we're creating these individual bones, in Maya we call those joints. Yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and click on the create joints option. So I'm gonna click on that one. Okay. Now when we start off with any of these models, we want to make sure that we start off with the boss. Yeah. So usually we have joints that are like more in charge than others. Yeah. So the start part that we start with usually is gonna be right at the center of the character's midsection. Yeah, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna click and drop off a joint right over there. Okay, so you see it kind of in that area. Okay, and you'll notice immediately in your outliner, it'll let you know there's a joint number 1 over there. Yeah, I'm also gonna actually switch my view so that I can see my lines. So I'm gonna go into shading and choose wireframe unshaded. This is just in case I decide that I want to do any kind of bend points. Yeah, now Legos in general, when we're working with these, we probably aren't going to be having it bend, but it is kind of cool to have that option, and so we're gonna kind of practice that. Okay, so here's my first joint over here. That's joint number 1. What I'm then gonna do is work my way up. Yeah, I'm gonna hold down the shift key just to keep things straight. Okay, and I'm gonna put the next joint right at the border between the midsection and the upper torso. So I'm gonna go ahead and click on that. Okay. I'm also going to click on and create a bend point right at the waist. So right about here. So this will be like a spine joint. I'm gonna click on right there. Okay. And then I'm going to create a joint right over here. Okay. And this is gonna be kind of our midpoint, where the arms can kind of flow out of. So I'm gonna hold on again, holding down shift, clicking on there. Okay, and then there's not too much left. I'm then going to go up to where the neck meets the head and drop off a joint right there. So still holding down shift, clicking, and then one last joint that goes through the top of the head. Yeah, and then we're gonna click on over there. Main reason why we're doing that one is so we have a joint down the center. Okay, all right. So again, just to review, we did our midsection joint, one at the division between the midsection and the torso, and then like a kind of a bend point right at the belly. Okay, then we'll have one at the chest, one at the where the neck meets the body, and then one that goes out through the top of the head. Yeah. Now when we hit return, what that's gonna do is lock in our joints. Yeah, and then we're gonna kind of see our progression going upwards. Okay, now if we take a look in your outliner, it is important to make sure we're labeling these. If not, we're just gonna end up with a bunch of really generic uh, names. Yeah, so I'm gonna go to joint 1. I'm gonna hold down the shift key and click on the plus sign next to it. What that'll do is it'll unfurl it basically, Yeah, and so now you're gonna see kind of all your joints. Yeah, and you'll see that they're kind of indented. Basically, the joint at the top is the boss. Each level, yeah, is kind of in charge of their own little section of joints. Yeah, so you'll notice that they're all not on the same level. You're not gonna have many joints at the same level, unless they're like symmetrical items. So your arms will end up being in the same level, your legs will be in the same level. Yeah, but the individual pieces, yeah, they all have to answer to somebody, with the exception of your original joint. Yeah, and that's your joint one. We're gonna actually rename this, so we're gonna call that we will call that the root joint. Yeah, root joint, and again, that's your main joint. That's your starting point. We're then going to go down the line. Yeah, sorry, go up the line here, go down the line in the outliner. Joint number two, double clicking on that one. That one looks like that will be our spine joint one. Yeah, and then we will then have our we'll call that spine one joint. That's a spine one joint. And then the next one we're gonna call our spine two joint. Yeah, it's a spine two joint. Okay, we are going to do a third one over here. We're not going to call that the spine joint though. That is going to be our chest joint, and we're going to name this really specifically. Yeah, so this is going to be called chest joint, and then we're going to put a NB at the end. Yeah, and NB means that it's a not it basically stands for no binding. Yeah, so we're not going to bind anything to this joint. That's only a placeholder. That's actually, well, not really a placeholder. It's there. Its primary purpose is to connect to the arms. Yeah, but it's not there to influence the movement of the figure. Okay, and then we have our neck joint. Yeah, so going up the line, and then last but not least, we have the top of head joint. Okay, this one's named pretty crazy. This is also going to be an NB, so we will not be binding that either. All right, and so that's just going to be our spine over here. Now, a couple things, yeah. When you click on your root joint, you notice that it highlights the whole thing. As you go up the line, yeah, basically the joint will highlight, but it will also highlight everything that it is in charge of. Yeah. Now, if you notice, I did jump into the side view just to double check, make sure that it is as centered as possible. Okay. When we're doing this, we want to make sure that the model doesn't like start to angle. Yeah, we want this to be like as centered as possible. It's a little bit confusing because when you think about characters or like people, you think of their spine being more towards the back. Yeah, but in a my rigging system, you just keep it down the middle. Yeah. All right, and if you kind of want to see how it looks in your perspective view as well, you can do that shading and do the X-ray joints, and that'll show you where the joints are located. Yeah. All right, so that's the spine. The next thing we're gonna work on is gonna be um, our clavicle. Yeah, so this one again, this is more for a fancy model. We're gonna just test it out on here, but we may not end up even using it for your animation. I'm gonna go to skeleton, create a joint over here, and then we're just gonna create a singular joint, and this is gonna be your clavicle. Now, kind of a uh, weird joint in general, but this is the bone, yeah, that's in that general area, the clavicle bone, and it's very useful whenever you're doing anything that requires you to do any stretching. If we don't have this bone, you would really have like weird rotations. Yeah, if you like raised your hand or did a jumping jack, yeah, this bone is very important for those sorts of things. Yeah, so I'm gonna create that joint. I'm just gonna rename that. So we're gonna call that left underscore clavicle, yeah, joint, and then this is an NB, so we're not going to be binding that. Yeah, so left clavicle joint. If you notice too, I will be labeling this in a certain way. You can write out left if you want. Just we're going to keep this consistent. So everything on the left side, we're going to make sure that we label it the same. Yeah, so all of mine are going to have capital L underscore. Just make sure that you have a good system for this, because we're only going to be making a left side, and then everything on the left side, and then whatever gets repeated on the right side, we're just going to mirror that over, yeah, to save ourselves a little bit of time. All right, so that's the left clavicle. I'm going to continue now. So we hit the return key, lock that in, yeah, and then we're going to do the arm next, and then the leg, yeah. So we're going to work on the left arm next. Okay, so skeleton, we're back into create joints. I'm going to create a joint right for the arm. Yeah, so I'm going to kind of start that off in the shoulder. Okay, I may end up moving this around a little bit. So if you notice, I'm in my side view, and looks like I'm going to be moving this over and down. Yeah, so kind of spacing that. Okay, and then yeah, so that should be kind of a good spot for it. So we kind of center that right over here. Yeah, so that let's kind of move it around. The other thing I'm gonna do here is, yeah, and then I can start to make the rest of the joints. Yeah, so then I'm gonna go back to create joints. I'm gonna click on one right at the elbow. Okay, I will be clicking on one right over here by the wrist. Yeah, so that's gonna allow us to turn the arm, and then one that kind of goes out through the claw. Yeah, so we're gonna drop another one off over here. What you're gonna notice is that I'm not making one for the inside and the outside of the claw, and the reason why is we're not gonna do any grabbing. If you watch like anything like the Lego movie or whatever, you're gonna notice that like they don't ever really grasp anything. Yeah, and so we're gonna kind of follow those rules. Yeah, so I know a little bit arbitrary, but that's what I'm doing here. All right, and then that's gonna be that part of the arm. Now you're gonna notice like because I moved the shoulder, I had to like make the forearm and lower separate. But we are gonna check in our side view and make sure that these are arranged correctly. Okay, so I'm gonna move this joint over here, yeah, and then um, kind of find my elbow. So we're actually gonna kind of bring that up a little bit. Okay, and then we're gonna use the move tool, yeah, to kind of place these other joints. Yeah, so if you can angle them as much as possible, if you can kind of only bring this forward and back. And the reason why is it already looks a certain way in the front view, and you don't want it to overlap with your you don't want it to like be moved around too much in your front view while we're moving it in our side view. Yeah, so if we're moving front to back, yeah, so I kind of have this up side by side. If you move this like front to back, you'll notice in the front view it's not really moving, even though I'm doing some extreme stuff over here. Okay, now you may also notice like I wanted to kind of clean up this arm over here. You may notice like the chain is a little bit crooked. If I want to move just one of these joints, what I'm going to do is press D. Yeah, so press D. That's our, if you remember, pivot point mode. We can kind of use that to kind of slide it, and then it will be the only joint moving. The rest will kind of accommodate it, but they'll stay in their place. Yeah. Whereas if you don't press D and just move it, it takes all of its children with it. Yeah. All right. Okay. And then once we have all of these pieces in place, yeah, we're going to now do a connection. So we're going to connect our shoulder joint to our elbow joint. Yeah. So I'm going to select this one right here. Hold down the shift key, select the shoulder, yeah, and then we're going to go into skeleton, and we're going to go to the settings next to connect joint. Yeah, so if you can go to the settings next to connect joint, there are two options here, and the first option is not what we want. Yeah, so mode, it's going to try to do a connect joint. We actually want it to do a parent. Yeah, and by parent we mean that we want one joint in charge of the other. Okay, when you do a connection here, what you're going to notice is that the joint kind of gets more pointy as it gets towards a child joint. Yeah, that all that means is the parent is in charge. So when you're moving this around, yeah, the child is going to have to listen. Yeah, and we do want that setup. Okay, now this is kind of an untraditional setup um, for a uh, for a model, especially for a joint system, just because usually when you're making joints, you have the character in a T pose, yeah, and that'll allow you to kind of um, put the joints in a little bit like straighter. But yeah, I mean, this will kind of work. Okay, I'm gonna move these joints over a little bit so it's more centralized. Yeah, but this should kind of work for what we're trying to do here. All right, and then that's for the arm. Okay, last thing we're gonna do is set up the leg joints. Yeah, so once again, we're in our skeleton. We're gonna go create joints. Oh, I just realized we should be labeling everything for the arm, so we'll do that first. Again, we did our spine stuff. We named our left clavicle. I'm gonna hit the Shift plus key next to joint number one, which is now our shoulder joint. Yeah, so if you can go ahead and label that again, left side, right. So I'm gonna continue with that naming scheme. So there's our left shoulder joint. Okay, and then next we have our left elbow joint. Yeah, so left elbow joint. Then we get to our left wrist joint. And then last but not least, we have left end of hand joint, and that'll be an NB. So that'll remind us later on we're not binding that one to anything. Yeah, we'll let the wrist take care of all of that. All right, so our last set of joints that we're going to be putting in is going to be for the leg. We don't have much that we have to do here. It's going to be very similar to how we did the arm. Yeah, so going back to your skeleton menu, go back to our create joints. We're going to click on here. Yeah, so I'm going to click one time. And that'll be the hip basically. Our next click is going to be where we think the knee is usually. Yeah, so if you can go ahead and find the knee, I'm gonna hold the shift key and click down there. Yeah, so kind of find that spot. Okay, and then we're gonna click a third time, yeah, right where we would assume the ankle would be. Okay, now we're gonna take a look at it in our side view afterwards. So if you can jump to your side view. Okay, and then we're gonna have two more pieces here. We're going to set this part up so that we can have one right here and then one going out the front. Yeah, so that'll be our joints for the leg. Yeah, okay, and then you can hit the return key on there. All right, and then for these we're just gonna label them super easily. Yeah, so if you click on shift click next to the plus sign, okay, and label these out. So this is going to be your left hip joint. Okay, then we have our left knee joint. Okay, here's our left, we can call it ankle joint. And then we can call the next one left foot joint. And then last but not least, we're gonna go and label this last one left out end of toes joint. So we'll probably name it that. And then this one is also going to be an NB. Okay, I apologize. I just noticed I named this incorrectly. End of claw joint. Yeah, so if you can kind of go back up to that one, that should be end of claw joint, not NB. Yeah, so end of claw joint, NB. This one again, it's not too important. We're not gonna be utilizing that to move things around or anything. All right, and then that's gonna be our basic setup for our character. Okay, so we're pretty much set. I'm gonna do a real quick double check, take a look in here, make sure that everything is doing what I wanted it to do. Everything's looking pretty good though. Yeah, just making sure everything's aligned. Yeah, because we did make our character down the center, we don't have to do a lot of movement there. I am going to center the spine joint a bit, so I'm going to click on this one right here, put my translate X at 0. Yeah, so if you can double check on that. Everything else that we're kind of going to leave alone. Okay, and then our next step is going to be connecting all of our joints. Yeah, so here's how that's going to work. We kind of already did this when we connected the elbow to the shoulder, but we're going to repeat that process. Yeah, so if you can connect your shoulder to your left clavicle. Yeah, so I'm going to click on the shoulder first, holding down shift, clicking on the left clavicle. Then we're going to go back to your skeleton menu and we're going to do our connect joint. Remember, if you remember, we did switch it to parent joint. Yeah, so that should work the way we want it to. Yeah, we want the clavicle to be in charge of the shoulder. Yeah, so skeleton, connect joint. Yeah, and then we know it's going in the right direction because the it's like getting pointy as it starts to flow outwards. Okay, we do the same thing with the clavicle. So I'm then going to click on the clavicle, hold down the shift key, click on the chest joint, and then we'll do our connect. Okay, we also got to connect the hip, left hip, yeah, to the root joint. So I'm going to click on the hip joint and then shift click on the root joint. Okay, here's our connect over there. All right, and then now we have one side of our rig fully set up. Okay, now the other thing we're gonna do here is create the other side. Yeah, so we're gonna mirror that over. And this part is where all of your work in naming is gonna pay off pretty well. So I am going to open these ones up. Yeah, so shift clicking on all of these, making sure I can see all of my joints. Yeah, so I can do a comparison. Yeah, but we'll do the arms first. I'm going to click on the left clavicle. Note, I'm going to only select the first thing that's labeled L. Yeah, so the first thing that's labeled as left. Not doing anything on the spine because we only need one spine. Yeah. These everything over here is what we're going to be mirroring over. Okay, so we've selected that left clavicle. We're going to go up now to skeleton. We are going to be mirroring this. Yeah, so we will be mirroring this. I believe your settings are going to be set as follows. Yeah, it's going to be XY. That's not going to be correct. We actually want your mirror to go over to YZ. Yeah, so we're going to mirror from the left side over to the right side. We are also going to be renaming things, yeah, and using what we have on here. So I'm going to tell it for everything that is on the left side when it gets mirrored over, if you can replace it by R, yeah. So L underscore, yeah, that's what's different about my left side. Switch it to R underscore. Okay, and then when I do a mirror, what that'll do is that'll drop off the entirety of that. If we take a look at that in your outliner, we should see like, oh, okay, now we have our system showing up on the right side without us having to like rebuild. Yeah, we're just mirroring it over. Okay, same thing for the leg. Yeah, so you can click on the left hip joint. We're gonna go to skeleton. Again, we'll go to our mirror joints just to take a check. Right, remember we did L and R over here. So if you do a mirror, okay, now we have the other joints for your leg. Okay, so our system is set up now. Our next objective is going to be binding your model to your skeleton.